Aircraft carriers are some of the most powerful war machines in the world. They're usually the centerpiece of any navy because of their ability to transport aircraft all over the world. But not every country has one. In fact, out of the 195 countries in the world, only a select few have at least one aircraft carrier. One country even has 11 aircraft carriers. So what country is it? And what other countries have aircraft carriers? Who would win if conflict were to break out on the high seas? But before we get into which countries have aircraft carriers, there's one thing you should know. Depending on the specific definition of aircraft carrier, there are various types of carriers currently in operation. Some are not included in this list, as they are designated with other names and serve different purposes. For example, we have aircraft cruisers, which combine the characteristics of aircraft carriers and surface warfare ships. They were built primarily for helicopters or float planes and were not designated to be a floating airbase, so they don't fit in with the more specific meaning of an aircraft carrier. We also have amphibious assault ships, which have flight decks and resemble aircraft carriers, but primarily operate helicopters and are not used as floating air bases. Now that everything is clear, the battle lines are drawn. Let the games begin. Number 13, Brazil. First, let's start with Brazil's Atlantico, which is a really interesting story. Atlantico began as a landing platform helicopter called HMS Ocean, commissioned by the Royal Navy. Ocean was a 667-foot-long, 21,500-ton warship that featured a full-length flight deck and flight control island. It was an amphibious ship with limited self-defense capability and could also embark up to 6 Apache attack helicopters for an offensive punch. Ocean had a nice run until it was decommissioned from the Royal Navy in 2018. However, the Brazilian Navy quickly acquired Ocean, fixed it up, and renamed it Atlantico. It is now redesignated as a multi-purpose aircraft carrier. The Atlantico is the only aircraft carrier based in South America. Number 12, China. The Chinese Navy has 2 aircraft carriers named Liaoning and Shandong. Originally, Liaoning was an unfinished aircraft carrier that the Soviet Union ordered. After the Soviet Union's collapse, the vessel was transferred to China, and the Chinese spent their time remodernizing it until it was finally commissioned in 2012. Liaoning is 999 feet long and weighs 67,000 tons when fully loaded. It's being used as a training ship for Chinese naval officers. China's second aircraft carrier, Shandong, was commissioned in 2019. It's nearly identical to Liaoning, but it was built from scratch on Chinese soil. Unlike Liaoning, Shandong is a fully operational carrier capable of combat operations. China is currently building a third carrier called Type 003 in Shanghai. The Department of Defense estimates the carrier will enter service in 2024, and that China may eventually build as many as 6 carriers, enough to match the number of U.S. carriers in the Pacific Fleet. Number 11, France. The Charles de Gaulle is France's first nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. France started building it during the Cold War, but the ship became fully operational in 2001. The de Gaulle is 858 feet long, weighs 45,000 tons when fully equipped, and is the most capable carrier outside the U.S. Navy. It was even used in combat operations against Al-Qaeda and the Taliban in 2001 and 2002, and against the Islamic State in the 2010s. France had plans to build 2 carriers, but after the Charles de Gaulle, it never built the second one. France, however, has plans to replace Charles in the 2030s with a new carrier, currently designated Porte-Avions Nouvelle Génération, or PANG. PANG will be 75,000 tons and operate a mixture of manned aircraft and drones. Number 10, India. India has been a long-time operator of aircraft carriers, but as of now, the country has just one carrier, INS Vikramaditya. Vikram was initially built for the Soviet Navy, but it was later transferred to the Indian Navy and refitted as an angled-deck aircraft carrier with catapults and arresting gear. It weighs 45,000 tons and can operate up to 28 MiG-29K multi-role strike fighters and Kamov helicopters for a total of up to 40 fixed-wing and rotary aircraft. India recently commissioned its second aircraft carrier, Vikrant, in 2022. Vikrant is India's first indigenous AC. It is just 1,000 tons larger than Vikramaditya, its sister carrier. Number 9. Italy. The Italian Navy is currently equipped with 2 functioning aircraft carriers. The first is Giuseppe Garibaldi, a 590-foot-long, 13,930-ton sea monster carrier that was commissioned in 1985. Giuseppe was used in the NATO intervention in Afghanistan, the war in Afghanistan, and the 2011 intervention in Libya. Italy planned to replace Giuseppe in 2022 with the new amphibious assault ship Trieste, however that date has been pushed back to July of 2023. Italy's second carrier, Cavour, is the flagship of the Italian Navy. Commissioned in 2009, Cavour is equipped with a well deck that can launch and recover landing aircraft, hovercraft, and amphibious vehicles. Cavour has been refitted after its commission and is now able to carry up to 12 F-35Bs and a dozen helicopters at a time. Number 8. Japan. Japan was once the largest and most proficient operator of aircraft carriers, having decommissioned 20 carriers and now currently has only 2 in service. Japan is building its first new carrier in nearly 80 years. Being a pacifist country, Japan banned aircraft carriers as tools of offensive warfare. However, it has recently started embracing them purely as defensive weapons. In 2018, citing concerns about the growing Chinese Navy and the construction of China's own carriers, Japan announced it would convert its 2 destroyer helicopter carriers, Izumo and Kaga, into carriers that could launch and recover F-35B Joint Strike Fighters. The now completed project was commissioned after refitting Izumo and Kaga with flight decks with aviation lighting, squaring the rear of the flight deck, adding fixed-wing ammunition, fuel and maintenance facilities, and a heat-resistant flight deck coating designed to handle an F-35B's downward-facing thrust nozzle. Both Izumo and Kaga have a displacement of 27,000 tons, and each of them can carry between a dozen and 16 F-35B fighters. Number 7. Russia. Russia's Admiral Kuznetsov is the largest conventionally powered aircraft carrier in the world and is also Russia's only flat top. The Admiral was actually built at Ukraine's Nikolaylev shipyards during the Cold War. This giant Kuznetsov displaces 58,000 tons and is 1,000 feet long. After the Soviet Union fell, the ship was not often used, but Russian President Vladimir Putin considers the Admiral a symbol of Russia's resurgence on the world stage. The Admiral has been sent to Syria on combat deployments. Aside from its symbolic use, Kuznetsov is actually a capable ship, able to operate up to 24 Su-33 Flanker D and MiG-29K fighter jets and 6 helicopters. But unfortunately, the ship is old and has been neglected for a long time. Kuznetsov has broken down at sea and has once suffered an electrical fire that killed 1 crewman. It also caught fire in dry dock and lost its dry dock when the floating dock PD-50 abruptly sank. The ship is nearing the end of a multi-year upgrade, but is scheduled to return to the fleet in late 2023. Number 6. Australia. Technically, Australia has 2 aircraft carriers, but they don't call them aircraft carriers but helo carriers, since they only use them for helicopters and deploying troops onto a shore. Their air wings consist of A-4 Skyhawks, S-2 trackers, and helicopters. Currently, they operate Seahawks, MRH-90s, and they can also operate Chinooks as well. It is well speculated that if they ever receive an upgrade to the deck, they could operate F-35s. Number 5. Spain. Spain's Juan Carlos I is a mixed amphibious light aircraft carrier designed for expeditions. The 757-foot-long, 26,000-ton ship is the only one of its class. It can land troops by sea and air, and also has a ski ramp to launch Harrier fighter jets. Spain's Harrier fighters are aging quickly, but Madrid has denied plans to purchase the F-35B fighter. If it does not, the ship could lose its air wing and turn into a purely amphibious warfare vessel. Number 4. Thailand. Thailand's HTMS Chakri Narubet is the only aircraft carrier native to Southeast Asia. It was built in Spain and, at a displacement of 11,000 tons and 599 feet, Chakri Narubet is the smallest carrier in the world. It was completed in 1997 and at the time carried 6 AV-8S Harrier fighter jets and 6 SH-60 Seahawk helicopters. The aircraft carrier also features royal accommodations fit for Thailand's king. Although it's still in active service, Thailand's carrier has been the victim of neglect over the past 2 decades and rarely ever leaves port. Number 3. Turkey. Turkey's TCG Anadolu, like Spain's Juan Carlos I, is a mixed amphibious light aircraft carrier. In fact, Anadolu is physically and dimensionally very similar to Spain's Juan Carlos I and was built using the same technology from the same Spanish shipyard. Apart from its aviation facilities and ski ramp, Anadolu can also launch and recover amphibious landing craft from a floodable well deck. Turkey plans to equip Anadolu with Bayraktar TB3 uncrewed aerial combat vehicles, or UCAVs. The TB3 is a folding wing version of the TB2 UCAV that has been used in combat in Libya, Armenia, and Ukraine. It can be used in strike, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance roles. Turkey plans to equip the ship with an air wing of up to 50 TB3s, giving it technically an air wing only second in numbers to American supercarriers. Number 2. The United Kingdom. Now we get to the Royal Navy, the second largest world power when it comes to aircraft carriers. The Royal Navy has decommissioned 41 aircraft carriers and currently has 2 in service, the HMS Queen Elizabeth and HMS Prince of Wales, both Queen Elizabeth-class ships. The 2 carriers are the largest warships to ever serve in the Royal Navy. They were both the product of an effort in the late 2000s by the United Kingdom to revamp its fixed-wing carrier capability, replacing 4 aging Invincible-class anti-submarine warfare carriers with larger, more capable ships. Queen Elizabeth and Prince of Wales both displace approximately 72,000 tons fully loaded and measure 920 feet long. The ships use a conventional propulsion system, like South Korea's CVX, that splits the ship's island superstructure into 2 distinct structures. The ships can carry about 20 to 24 F-35Bs with provisions to carry up to 36 in emergencies. And at number 1, the United States. Finally, we get to the largest world power in aircraft carriers, the United States of America. The U.S. Navy operates 2 classes of supercarriers, the Nimitz and Ford classes. The Nimitz class consists of 10 ships weighing 105,000 tons fully loaded and is 1,092 feet long. The Ford class, consisting of the USS Gerald R. Ford, is roughly the same weight and size but includes next-generation technology such as an electromagnetic aircraft launch system, advanced arresting gear for recovering planes, and a new dual-band radar and electromagnetic weapons handling elevators. Both classes normally accommodate up to 75 aircraft,